Hello and a very warm welcome. Thanks for tuning in to News 9 Live. I'm Kabir Naqvi and you're watching this broadcast from our studios here in the National Capital Region. Over the course of the next 45 to 50 minutes, ladies and gentlemen, we'll take you through all the top global stories that the entire world is talking about. Of course, first and foremost, we're going to shift our focus to the Russian terror attack, a synagogue that was put up in blaze, and of course a traffic post that was also attacked. This in Dagestan in Russia, and what we're also picking up is that this echoes exactly what happened a couple of days back at the Crocus City Hall shooting. Take a look at this, ladies and gentlemen. In a terrorist attack in Russia, gunmen opened fire at a synagogue, an Orthodox church, and a police post in simultaneous assaults across two cities in the North Caucasus region of Dagestan today. Russian anti-terrorist committee and investigative committee released footage of investigating the scenes of the recent attack in Dagestan. What we're also picking up at this point in time is that the latest that is coming out of Dagestan, the gunmen who attacked the religious buildings in Russia's Dagestan region, they have been quote-unquote eliminated as per the Russian sources. 3 days of mourning has been declared after over 15 people were reportedly killed during the multiple assaults in the restive North Caucasus of Dagestan. Now, 5 people responsible for the multiple gun attacks targeting churches and synagogues in Russia's Dagestan, they have been eliminated. Meanwhile, what we're also picking up is that a criminal investigation has been launched under the anti-terrorism laws after gunmen killed almost 19 people in coordinated attacks in the two cities in the restive region in the North Caucasus. This is the Dagestan region. And according to various international agencies, police officers, almost 15 of them, were killed in a series of attacks in the southern Russian region of Dagestan. Now, Dagestan particularly, even as you're looking at all these visuals coming across from the attack that took place on the intervening hours of Sunday and Monday, Dagestan has previously been the scene of Islamist attacks. Media reports suggest 6 of the attackers are dead. The hunt is certainly on for others. But let's take you through exactly what happened. Thick smoke was seen rising from a synagogue due to a fire following a series of attacks in the southern Russian region of Dagestan on Sunday. Take a look at some of those visuals on your screens, ladies and gentlemen. This is that synagogue that went up in flames. Now, eyewitness videos, they kept cropping up on the internet. Eyewitness videos showed people wearing dark clothes, shooting, followed by emergency service vehicles driving on a street in Makhachkala in southern Russia. The authorities have announced a counter-terrorist operation in this region. And whilst we're talking about this, the latest attacks in Dagestan echo those that took place in Crocus City Hall and the Makhachkala airport.
145 people were killed at the Crocus Concert Hall in March. Islamic State claimed...
This is the Crocus City Hall, ladies and gentlemen, that happened in March this year. A concert that was going on wherein gunmen entered and opened fire after shutting the doors of these auditoriums. This is what happened in Crocus City in the month of March. And this is what has happened now on Sunday, ladies and gentlemen. A synagogue that was attacked, the Orthodox church that was attacked, a police post that was also attacked. Now, we also got visuals of the Russian intelligence services. As you can see, a cordon and search operation is taking place. You can see those wires that have been put out, the cordon tapes that are usually put across by the police. The intelligence service officials, they were investigating the scene of the attack in Dagestan. There were damaged cars, of course. The area near the church has completely been closed down. The servicemen of the federal security, you can see them all across Dagestan at this point in time. Of course, several of those weapons, we've had to maintain screen hygiene for you, ladies and gentlemen, which is why those blood-ridden shots have to be deleted. But there was a lot of gruesome killing that took place over here. Arms and weaponry, as you can see, all these Russian soldiers, almost like a cleansing operation that is now taking place over there. The gunmen with automatic weapons, they burst into the Orthodox church and the synagogue in the ancient city of Derbent. This is Sunday evening. They set fire to an icon at the church and killed a 66-year-old Orthodox priest as well. And in the Caspian city of Makhachkala, about 125 kilometers, this is north of Moscow, attackers shot at a traffic police post and attacked a church as well. Gun battles had erupted all across. even as we're bringing you these latest shots, these latest visuals, the Crocus City comparison as well for you to witness and see about what happened and the syntax of the attack, the way with which it was attacked, from Makachkala to Derbent to the synagogue to the old Orthodox church and the traffic police post as well. 15 officers, in totality 19 people that were killed. And the attack comes just 3 months after 145 people were killed in an attack claimed by the Islamic State on a concert hall near Moscow, the Crocus City attack that we've just showed you as well. The worst terrorist attack to strike Russia in many, many years, ladies and gentlemen. Another one of those visuals from Makachkala on your screens. Now, state news agency TASS cited law enforcement as saying that among the attackers were 2 sons of the head of central Dagestan's Sargokala district who had been detained by the investigators. Russian anti-terrorist committee and investigative committee released on a Monday footage of the investigating of the scene of the recent attack in Dagestan. The hunt is on for many those attackers. Many of them have been eliminated. Meanwhile, the death toll, many of them officers, stands at 19 at this point in time. 3 days mourning and a criminal investigation that has been launched by Russia.
A day after a series of brazen attacks on places of worship in Russia's Dagestan, a synagogue continues to smoulder. The mostly Muslim region announced 3 days of mourning on Monday after gunmen went on a rampage there in coordinated assaults on 2 of the republic's most important cities. The death toll has risen to at least 20. Here's Sergei Melikov, the governor of the Dagestan region.
Today has become a day of tragedy for Dagestan, and not only for Dagestan, but for our entire country. Unprecedented in their cruelty, terrorist attacks were committed today against religious sites in the capital of Dagestan, Makachkala, and our ancient city of Derbent.
Melikov added that authorities understand who is behind the organisation of the attacks, adding that foreign forces had been involved in preparing the assault. He did not give details, and there has been no immediate claim of responsibility. Attackers with automatic weapons burst into an Orthodox church and a synagogue in the ancient city of Derbent on Sunday evening. They set fire to an icon at the church and killed 66-year-old Orthodox priest Nikolai Kotelnikov. In the Caspian city of Makachkala, around 75 miles north, attackers shot at a traffic police post and attacked a church. Gun battles erupted around the Assumption Cathedral in Makachkala, with heavy automatic gunfire ringing out late into the night. At least 5 of the attackers were killed, and Russia's investigative committee said the majority of those dead were policemen. Dagestan is made up of a patchwork of ethnic groups, languages and regions that live in the shadow of the Caucasus Mountains between the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea. President Vladimir Putin, who has long accused the West of trying to stoke separatism in the area, expressed condolences to those who lost relatives via his spokesman, Dmitry Peskov. The attack on Christian and Jewish places of worship has stoked fears Russia may be facing a renewed militant Islamist threat just 3 months after a deadly attack in Moscow. 145 people were killed at the Crocus concert hall in March. Islamic State claims responsibility for that attack.
Now, there's a 3-day mourning that has been put forth and a criminal investigation that is also on. Meanwhile, Russia, the world's biggest nuclear power, has started updating its nuclear doctrine. The statement comes from Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov, citing an earlier statement by President Vladimir Putin. He said, and I quote, "President Putin has said that work is underway to bring the doctrine into line with the current realities." I unquote. Now, a senior member of the Russian parliament said that Moscow could reduce the decision-making time stipulated in the official policy for the use of nuclear weapons if it believes that threats are on the rise. Putin said last month that Russia might change its official nuclear doctrine, setting out the conditions under which such weapons could be used. Now, the war in Ukraine has triggered the biggest confrontation between Russia and the West since the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. Shift our focus to what's happened in South Korea today. A powerful explosion that took place at a lithium battery factory that has killed more than 19 people. Take a look at this. A powerful explosion. It set fire to a lithium battery factory. This is in South Korea. Killed 22 workers as well. The fire, which has largely been extinguished at this point in time, ripped through a factory run by battery manufacturer Aricel in Hwasong, a major industrial cluster about 90 minutes southwest of the capital of South Korea, Seoul. Now, 18 Chinese workers were among the dead. The nationality of the remaining deceased workers has not yet been confirmed. According to reports, the blaze, after a series of battery cells exploded, well, it came about inside a warehouse that had some 35,000 units, another flammable substance where an already high-powered blast has taken place. Due to the intensity of this blaze, now rescuers were finding it difficult. The fire tenders sought it very difficult to identify the dead bodies and the deceased. Parts of the upper level of the factory, the upper floors, they had collapsed completely, and large chunks of the building looked like they had been blown out into the street due to the explosion, telling us about the capacity and the size of this explosion. Listen in to a reaction from the local authority as well.
There are 7 male workers, 15 female workers, and 1 unidentified worker are missing. Among them, there are 20 workers with foreign nationalities, 2 South Koreans and 1 unidentified. Rescue workers entered the building and began the search operation. Among the missing workers, there are Chinese nationals and other foreign nationals. Like I said before, about 20 workers are foreign nationals, but the list of them was burned, so it will take more time to check their exact nationalities.
22 people have been confirmed dead after a large explosion set a lithium battery factory on fire in South Korea on Monday, local fire officials said. The blaze started after a series of battery cells exploded inside a warehouse with some 35,000 units, a local fire official said. What had triggered the explosion remains unclear. The factory is run by battery manufacturer Aracel in Hwaseong, a major industrial cluster about 90 minutes southwest of the capital Seoul. Parts of the factory's upper level had collapsed, and large chunks of the building had been blown out into the street. Earlier, smoke was captured billowing across the city skyline. A Reuters witness saw firefighters moving up to 6 bodies out of the factory. 18 Chinese workers and 1 Laotian were among the dead, local fire official Kim Jin-young told reporters, citing information from company officials. South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol visited the scene and was given a briefing by officials. Interior Minister Lee Sang-min called on local authorities to prevent any hazardous chemicals from contaminating the area. Kim Tae-ho, a fire and disaster prevention professor at Daejeon University, said battery materials like nickel are easily flammable, so the fire probably spread too quickly for workers to escape. Aracel makes lithium primary batteries for sensors and radio communication devices. Calls to its offices went unanswered. The company is not listed on South Korea's stock market, but is majority owned by S-Connect, according to regulatory filings. S-Connect is registered on the junior KOSDAQ index and its shares closed down 22.5%. South Korea is a major industrial economy and has made efforts to improve its safety record after several past accidents, many of which have been blamed on negligence.
Now, like we promised, we're going to take you across all the top developments that are taking place across the world. And from South Korea, let's shift our focus to the north. A top North Korean military official has criticized the United States. Well, why? For increasing military aid to Ukraine, signaling support for Moscow in the ongoing conflict, of course. Following Vladimir Putin's recent visit to Pyongyang, Russia and North Korea committed to mutual military assistance, potentially boosting their anti-United States alliance and enabling arms trading. Washington and Seoul are concerned about this cooperation, accusing both these nations, North Korea and Russia, of violating international laws, which Russia and North Korea certainly deny. Here's a report.
A top North Korean military official on Monday criticized the US for increasing military aid to Ukraine, according to state media, a show of support for Moscow in the ongoing Ukraine war. A recent pact between Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un, announced during Putin's visit to Pyongyang last week, commits both countries to provide immediate military assistance in the case of aggression against either one of them, potentially enabling arms trading and strengthening their anti-US alliance. Both Washington and Seoul are concerned about the prospect of increased military cooperation between Moscow and Pyongyang, and have accused them of already violating international laws by trading arms for use against Ukraine. Russia and North Korea deny these claims. North Korea's Pak Jong-chon, the top official speaking in state media Monday, warned of a potential strong response from Moscow if the US pushes Ukraine towards a proxy war against Russia, possibly leading to a new world war. He referred to comments by the Pentagon last week that Ukrainian forces can use US-supplied weapons to strike Russian forces anywhere across the border into Russia. In a joint statement released the same day by Seoul's foreign ministry, officials from South Korea, the US and Japan strongly condemn the deepening military ties between North Korea and Russia.
Well, the role of United States, that's under question now, isn't it? Be it the Ukraine war, be it the West Asian conflict. And when you're looking at Southeast Asia, United States' role vis-a-vis the role of China and them being at loggerheads become even more crucial. Taiwan President Lai Ching-te declared on Monday that democracy is not a crime and autocracy is the real evil, actually. Following China's threats to impose the death penalty in extreme cases for die-hard Taiwan independence separatists. Now, China, which considers Taiwan its own territory, has openly criticized Lai Ching-te, labeling him as a separatist and conducting war games shortly after his inauguration just last month. Now, on Friday, China increased pressure on Taiwan by issuing new legal guidelines to punish those supporting the island's formal independence, despite Chinese courts having no jurisdiction over Taiwan. Lai Ching-te firmly rejects Beijing's sovereignty claims, asserting that only Taiwan's people can determine their future. He has consistently offered to hold talks with China, but his overtures have been rejected so far.
Actually, I want to stress that democracy is not a crime. It's autocracy that is the real evil. China has absolutely no right to sanction Taiwan's people just because of the positions they hold. What's more, China has no right to go after Taiwan's people's rights across borders. I also want to call on China to face up to the existence of the Republic of China and have exchanges and dialogue with Taiwan's democratically elected legitimate government. This is the only correct way to increase the welfare of people on both sides of the strait. If this is not done, relations between Taiwan and China will only become more and more estranged.
We're going to shift our focus to the West Asian conflict between Israel and, of course, Hamas. We were earlier looking at Gaza, but now Benjamin Netanyahu says that the operations and offensive in Gaza might be coming to an end, but the war is far from over. Are we looking at a potential shift in focus? Is it going to be the Hezbollah in Lebanon next? Well, we'll have to wait and find out. More to decode over here. The intense fighting in the Gaza Strip may soon end, but the war is far from over. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has made it clear that the conflict will not cease until Hamas relinquishes all control over the battered enclave. In an interview to a TV channel, Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel, stated that easing the fighting in Gaza will allow Israel to focus more militarily on resources on the Hezbollah in Lebanon. He also mentioned that Israel is willing to pause fighting in Gaza in exchange for the return of hostages held by Hamas-led militants. However, Benjamin Netanyahu emphasized that Israel is obligated to resume fighting after the pause to achieve their goal of destroying Hamas completely. Listen in to what Benjamin Netanyahu had to say.
I mean, it's within a month?
The end of the phase of intense fighting?
Yes. Is it up to a month?
Very soon. If there is an agreement, it will be an agreement according to our terms, and our terms are not to end the war, to leave Gaza and leave Hamas as it is. I refuse to leave Hamas as it is. We need to eliminate it. In the end, you will have to do two things. You will need the ongoing military demilitarization by the Israel Defense Forces, and you will need to establish a civil administration, I hope with the support and management of certain countries in the region. I think this is the right way to move forward. I'll tell you what I'm not ready to do. I'm not ready to establish a Palestinian state there. I'm not ready to hand it over to the Palestinian Authority. I'm not ready to do that.
Well, now the protests that are taking place in Tel Aviv would tell you otherwise. But just last month, President Joe Biden unveiled a multi-stage peace proposal that was supported by the United Nations Security Council, which provided for a ceasefire that could potentially end the fighting. Now, the Biden administration confirmed that Israel accepted the plan and has been urging Hamas to do the same. In response, Hamas issued a statement on Monday accusing Benjamin Netanyahu of rejecting the UN Security Council resolution and President Biden's proposals. Hamas called on the international community to pressurize Israel to end the war and urged the Biden administration to stop supporting Israel, claiming Washington is a key partner in the conflict's perpetuation. Hamas-led militants killed almost 1,200 people and kidnapped over 250 in a violent raid on Israeli communities near Gaza. On the 7th of October, more than 100 hostages remain in Gaza, though many are believed dead. This attack prompted Israel's military assault on Gaza, which has resulted in over 37,000 Palestinian deaths, according to the local authorities and the Gazan Health Ministry. Netanyahu also mentioned that once the Gaza fighting eases, Israel would deploy more forces along the northern border with Lebanon, where clashes with the Hezbollah have intensified, displacing tens of thousands of Israelis. The primary goal, Netanyahu said, is to establish defensive positions in the north. Now take a look at this. How is the European world certainly reacting to this? European Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell warned today that the Middle East, West Asia for us Indians, is on the brink of expanding the conflict into Lebanon and possibly beyond. He noted that Iran-backed Hezbollah recently threatened European Union members in Cyprus, emphasizing the growing risk of the war that is spreading. Reactions from major stakeholders on your screens next.
Every day the crises are spilling over. Every day there are more bombing on both sides of the border in Lebanon. Until that unhappily we are on the eve of the war spending.
Now, in a different attack, 8 Palestinians were killed in an Israeli airstrike on a building near Gaza City being used to distribute aid, according to the witnesses that were present there. They said the strike hit part of an industrial college that was run by the UN Palestinian refugee agency, UNRWA.
8 Palestinians were killed on Sunday in an Israeli airstrike on a building near Gaza City being used to distribute aid, according to witnesses. They said the strike hit part of an industrial college run by the UN Palestinian refugee agency, UNRWA. Mohammed Tafesh, one of the witnesses, described how some were collecting water and others were receiving coupons when the strike hit. He said they'd since been pulling people from the rubble, including one person who had been selling cold drinks and another who used to sell pastries. The Israeli military did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Juliet Tuma, UNRWA's Director of Communications, said the agency was looking into the details of the reported attack before providing more information. She added that since the beginning of the war, nearly 190 of their buildings had been hit, the vast majority of their facilities in Gaza. More than 8 months into the conflict, and Israel's advance is focused on 2 areas it is yet to seize. One is the area surrounding Deir al-Balah in the enclave center. The other is Rafah in the south. Residents said on Sunday that Israeli tanks had advanced to the edge of the Mawasi displaced persons camp in the northwest of Rafah, amid fierce clashes with Hamas-led fighters. The Israeli military said it was continuing intelligence-based targeted operations in the Rafah area and had located weapon stores and tunnel shafts and killed Palestinian gunmen. The armed wings of Hamas and the Islamic Jihad movement said their fighters had attacked Israeli forces in Rafah with anti-tank rockets, mortar bombs, and pre-planted explosive devices.
Meanwhile, hundreds of Israeli protesters gathered right outside the Prime Minister's residence in Caesarea and Jerusalem, demanding a deal to release all the hostages that are held in Gaza. Take a look at the sea of crowd over there. Many waved the Israeli flag and criticized the government's handling of the conflict. Netanyahu's government has insisted that it will not stop the war until Hamas is completely relinquished or destroyed and all the hostages are returned. But intensive efforts are underway to secure a halt to the fighting that might lead to a full ceasefire. However, Netanyahu faces pressure from nationalist religious parties in his own coalition to refuse a deal with Hamas and go ahead with the long-promised offensive against the southern Gaza city of Rafah. Although despite the recurring weekly demonstrations, the political landscape remains unchanged, with Benjamin Netanyahu maintaining a stable majority in the parliament.
We know that the only way to return the hostages and to start the healing process of this country is to eliminate this racist, messianic, corrupted government that chooses all the time, that chooses their survival over the hostages' survival. So every day counts here. And the way we do it, we're using nonviolent protest everywhere we can, in the streets, in the cities, next to the houses, in order to make sure that this government ceases to exist as soon as possible. Once it ceases to exist, there will be a hostages deal, and we will start the healing process that Israel needs so much.
We're going to shift our focus to what's happening ahead of the Iranian elections. 28th of June, ladies and gentlemen, when Iran goes to vote. And a proper story that was put out by Reuters talks about this major divide ever since and over the 2022 Mahsa Amini protest that has come to the fore. It seems like the youth is divided. On what fronts and what are the opinions on both these sides? Well, listen in and take a look at this. Try to understand what's happening inside Iran. Now, as Iran prepares to vote on the 28th of June, a deep divide among young voters is emerging, shaped largely by the 2022 Mahsa Amini protest that shook the entire nation. In 2022, many young Iranians joined angry protests against the rulers, while others played a role in suppressing these demonstrations. This rift in political views continues to shape their perspectives on the upcoming election. Reflecting a sentiment of disillusionment, some young voters plan to abstain completely from voting. They're not going to vote at all. One young protester expressed that this election, like all elections in Iran, is a circus. Why should I vote when I want the regime to be toppled? Now, this statement highlights the widespread skepticism among some Iranian youth. Now, take a look at this. In stark contrast, other young Iranians see voting as a religious duty. One supporter of the regime stated, and I quote, "I will sacrifice my life for the leader and the Islamic Republic. It is my religious duty to go ahead and vote," I unquote, emphasizing support for a hardline candidate who champions economic self-sufficiency and stronger ties with China and Russia, the Axis bloc. Now, the upcoming election features 6 candidates, 5 of whom are hardliners, with one low-key moderate. They have been actively using social media to reach the 60% of Iran's 85 million population under the age of 30 years. Despite these efforts, the hashtag election circus has been trending on social media platform X, indicating a significant call for an election boycott. Under Iran's clerical system, while the president runs the government day to day, his powers are limited by the supreme leader, who's on your screens, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who has the final say on major issues. This has fueled the belief among some young Iranians that voting is, well, futile. One youth remarked, and I quote, "Even if it was a free and fair election, if all candidates could enter the race, the president in Iran has no power at all." Now, the 2022 protests, sparked by the death of Mahsa Amini in police custody, led to the largest show of opposition to Iran's clerical rulers in many, many years. Many young participants in these protests faced severe consequences, including arrests and expulsions from universities, which shattered their personal and professional dreams. Conversely, some young Iranians believe the protests brought unnecessary pressure on Iran from Western countries. One young person mentioned, and I quote, "I wish the protests had not taken place. Our enemies used it as a pretext to mount pressure on our country." Now, as Iran approaches the June 28th voting day, the division among its youth remains a telling indicator of the nation's broader political landscape. While some express a longing for change and a free country, others continue to stand firmly with the current regime, driven by a sense of duty and loyalty. What's going to happen on the June 28th? Well, we'll wait and find out. Moving on, ladies and gentlemen, there's another region which is going to vote. Of course, the United States, Trump versus Biden, but in the United Kingdom, 4th of July, right after Iran, it's United Kingdom's term. And immigration has been one of those key issues in this year's British general election campaign. All the main parties are pledging to reduce net migration from record levels the country has seen over the past 2 years. Take a look at this. It looks increasingly likely that after the country votes on the 4th of July, Rishi Sunak is most likely not going to remain as the Prime Minister. Of course, nothing's set in stone at this point in time. The Conservative Party is set to be wiped out at the polls according to the approval ratings, and the Labour Party, of course, led by Sir Keir Starmer, will win an outright majority, making the leader, Sir Keir Starmer, the next Prime Minister. So what will the change of government mean for those considering a move to live and work in the United Kingdom? Well, for people who are traveling or planning to live in the United Kingdom or start their jobs in the United Kingdom, take a look at this. There have been raising concerns about the record high levels of net migration in the UK. The Conservative Party played to these concerns that many felt was anti-immigration. However, the Labour Party remains committed to lowering net migration by reforming immigration policies if it does win the election. Labour Party's proposed immigration policy is to implement a fair and properly managed immigration system. It aims to reduce UK business dependency on workers from overseas to fill skills and shortages, a big concern for Indians back at home. To do this, a Labour government will increase incentives for businesses to train local UK workers. Other measure could potentially mean a cap on numbers or further refinement of the immigration salary list. The party also pledges to strengthen the Migration Advisory Committee, which is also called the MAC. It is an independent body that advises the government on day-to-day immigration policy essentials. In essence, it will train domestic UK workers to do the jobs that overseas workers are employed to do so. But here's a catch. Even if you're talking about nurses, even if you're talking about electricians, there's a time in training those UK locals. The conclusion to draw from all this is that although there are pledges within the Labour manifesto, in short to medium term, the party does not have much room to maneuver beyond the changes that have already been introduced by the Conservative Party earlier this year. But what's going to happen? Well, we'll have to again wait and find out. After Iran, it's going to be the United Kingdom, and later on in the year, it's going to be, of course, the United States. But ladies and gentlemen, even as we're looking at snap polls, we're looking at France's political structure, Interior Minister Gérald Darmanin, he said that we have to be wary and have to be prepared because there could be violence as well. Civil unrest risk in France or not? Let's find out. French Interior Minister Gérald Darmanin, he said that France could see civil unrest and violence that is related to the elections. Poll campaigning in France enters its last week before the first round of voting begins. President Emmanuel Macron, who shocked the nation with the decision to dissolve the National Assembly earlier this month, snap elections is what we're calling it, is not on the ballot. However, for many voters, the election is perceived as a referendum on the fate of a president once seen as a stable and able person to overcome political divisions, but whose approval ratings collapsed after several political crises.
It is possible that there will be extremely strong tensions. First of all, on the evening of the elections. So we will be making sure that order is maintained. On Wednesday morning, that is June 26, I'll be holding a meeting with the security and intelligence services to prepare the first and second rounds, so they take place calmly, democratically. But mainly, I'm afraid of tensions after this summer. Who's going to pay? The people always end up paying for the errors, the demagoguery of extremist parties. Unfortunately, the alternative is that they don't do what they say. They will. So they'll have lied to the French people, and in that case, the frustration and the anger will even be greater. So yes, I think in September, October, November, there could be really big societal, social problems.
Moving on, let's bring you up to speed with some stories that are coming out of Africa as well. Kenyan President William Ruto, he praised the young protesters and promised to engage with them, hold a dialogue with them. And all of this is happening because the youngsters are out on the streets demonstrating over the government's plans to raise revenues through additional taxation. Take a look at this next report for a better understanding.
Kenya's protests followed President William Ruto to a school on Sunday where he was attending the consecration of a bishop.
I am telling Ruto, I am telling Kenya police.
Widespread youthful demonstrations have erupted across the country over a proposed finance bill that aims to raise an extra $2.7 billion through additional taxes. Inside the school in the town of Nyahururu, Ruto was offering his praise.
I am very proud of our young people. They have stepped forward tribeless. They have stepped forward peaceful. And I want to tell them we are going to engage them.
Outside, protesters were, according to local media reports, blocking vehicles belonging to leaders of Ruto's ruling Kenya Kwanza party. Ruto was whisked away by his security team when they realized the crowds were there to confront him. Protesters say the finance bill threatens to stifle the economy and raise living costs for Kenyans who are already struggling. However, the International Monetary Fund has insisted on the necessity of the bill for reducing the budget deficit and state borrowing. Last week, Ruto endorsed recommendations to scrap some of the new levies, including on car ownership, bread, cooking oil, and financial transactions. Parliament is scheduled to debate the bill on Tuesday and vote on proposed amendments.
Well, the aviation sector has been marred with various kinds of irregularities, difficulties, and of course all those accidents as well. Now, United States' prosecutors are recommending to senior Justice Department officials that criminal charges be brought against Boeing after finding the plane maker violated a settlement related to 2 fatal crashes.
Boeing may yet face criminal charges. Reuters sources say prosecutors are recommending the move after finding the plane maker violated a settlement related to 2 fatal crashes. Boeing had been shielded from criminal charges over the loss of 2 737 MAX jets in 2018 and 2019. Under the terms of a deal agreed in 2021, the company avoided prosecution for conspiracy to commit fraud over design flaws with the planes. That was in return for overhauling its compliance procedures and submitting regular reports. It also agreed to pay $2.5 billion to settle an investigation into the crashes. However, the sources say prosecutors have now concluded that Boeing did not honour the terms of the deal. That follows the mid-air blowout on another MAX jet earlier this year, which revived concerns over the firm's quality controls. There was no comment on the report from the Justice Department or Boeing, which has previously insisted it met all terms set by the 2021 deal. Appearing before Congress last week, Chief Executive Dave Calhoun insisted the firm was striving to address its problems.
Much has been said about Boeing's culture. We've heard those concerns loud and clear. Our culture is far from perfect, but we are taking action and we are making progress.
Now it's not clear exactly what charges might be brought, with possible penalties including a big fine. It's thought the company would be reluctant to negotiate a settlement if it meant pleading guilty, as that could see it hit with extra business restrictions. Relatives of victims in the 2 fatal crashes have long criticised Boeing's exemption from prosecution. They protested inside and outside Congress during Calhoun's appearance, demanding that the company face criminal charges.
Next up, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to shift our focus because here at News 9, we take climate change very, very seriously. And why mustn't we? The Great Barrier Reefs, well, there's a proper disease that's going through of coral bleaching. It's raining heavily, flood fury in some parts of the world, and other parts are, well, sweating under a sweltering heat wave as well. Why is all of this happening? Because of global warming and climate change. Take a look at this. A research shows that climate change is driving dangerous heat waves across the northern hemisphere and will continue to deliver dangerous weather for decades to come. Here's how climate change is pushing heat to the new extremes. We've already seen what's happening here back at home. But as the continued burning of fossil fuels releases more carbon emissions to the atmosphere, the air can trap more heat from the sun, causing the average global temperature to certainly rise over time. We're looking at a 1 degree Celsius in about a century, but scientists at the IPCC go on to say that that could be well over 3 degrees Celsius. Now, take a look at this. Already the global average temperature has risen nearly 1.3 degrees Celsius since the start of the Industrial Revolution, when Western countries began burning coal and other fossil fuels. That higher baseline means climate change is already making all heat waves hotter than they would have been without atmospheric warming. They are also becoming more frequent overall and more dangerous as well. Now, factors that are impacting the heat wave. Beyond global warming, there are other factors and conditions that can affect heat waves. Climate systems such as the El Nino or La Nina can have big impacts along with regional circulation patterns. Land cover can also play a role, with dark surfaces and built environments is tending to get hotter than reflective white surfaces or than natural systems like forests or various wetlands. Now, what is next for all of us? Because even if all carbon emissions were halted today, the world has already emitted enough to ensure that climate change will continue to push temperatures upward for decades to come. The world must cut emissions in half from 1995 levels by 2030 and to net zero by the year 2050. This will have a chance of keeping the average global temperature rise to around 1.5 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial average. Instead, global emissions have only gone up since 1995. The world is currently on track to reach 2.7 degrees Celsius by the year 2100, blowing way past the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold, beyond which scientists predict catastrophic and irreversible climate impacts. If you haven't already started thinking about it, the time is now, ladies and gentlemen. And we'll keep talking about stories that are going to come your way, that are going to be mind-boggling and eye-boggling as well. Take a look at this. Saudi authorities announced on Sunday that over 1,300 people have died during this year's Hajj pilgrimage in Saudi Arabia, as pilgrims encountered extremely high temperatures at the Islamic holy sites. 1,300 people, ladies and gentlemen, because of heatwave had died in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Health Minister Fahad bin Abdurrahman Al-Jalajal said that 83% of the 1,301 deaths were among unauthorized pilgrims who traveled long distances in the intense heat to perform the Hajj rituals in and around the holy city of Mecca. In an interview with state-owned television agency, the minister stated that 95 pilgrims were being treated in hospitals, with some airlifted to the capital Riyadh for treatment. He added that the deceased were buried in Mecca without providing a breakdown. The casualties included more than 660 Egyptians out of those 1,300 people. According to two officials in Cairo, all but 31 of them were unauthorized pilgrims. Egyptian authorities have revoked the licenses of 16 travel agencies that facilitated unauthorized pilgrimages to Saudi Arabia. "1,300 people, ladies and gentlemen, that have died because of sweltering heat during the Hajj in Saudi Arabia. Meanwhile, on the other side, China's weather agency has issued a red alert, its highest warning level, for heavy rain across multiple eastern provinces. Footage on state broadcaster CCTV showed swollen rivers, flooded farmlands, and residents being evacuated on rubber dinghies on Sunday. The annual flooding season started earlier than usual this year in China's south, with intense storms sweeping away bridges, destroying low-rise homes, devastating agricultural output, and inundating numerous cities. Several areas may experience more torrential rain over the next 2 weeks as a persistent rain belt shifts northwards, according to the state media that quoted the National Met Center of China. And from China to the United States, where more than 100 million people across the US were under heat wave warnings on Sunday. I mean, of course, it is a little humorous. Their 37.7 is a heat wave, whereas in Delhi, we've seen the temperature cross the 45 Celsius degree mark every now and then. But people in the United States were under heat warnings on Sunday, almost about more than 100 million of them, with cities on the East Coast bracing for record-breaking temperatures as the heat dome causing the dangerous conditions expands to the West Coast. Residents in Washington, D.C.'s Georgetown neighborhood and in Boston, Massachusetts, kept themselves cool using water fountains. Baltimore and Philadelphia are forecast to touch records near 38 degrees Celsius on Sunday, while temperatures rose higher in states like Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming, much above normal for this time of the year. The extreme heat is expected to shift to Nebraska and Kansas today, according to the National Weather Service. Officials are warning of dangerous conditions in the Philadelphia region, where high humidity could drive heat indices above 41 degrees Celsius, making it feel even hotter than the actual temperature. Like I said, if you're not already thinking about climate change, well, start doing it. We're going to slip into a quick commercial break here, ladies and gentlemen. But before we do so, take a look at this, because NASA astronauts Matthew Dominic and Tracy Dyson they performed a spacewalk that the internet is now going crazy about. Of course, if I'm not wrong, you can also see Sunita Williams over there. Meanwhile, Matthew Dominic and Tracy Dyson, they performed a spacewalk outside the International Space Station. The two astronauts will exit the International Space Station to gather living organisms growing on the facility. Now, during the 6.5-hour operation, they will swab surfaces on 2 pieces of equipment to determine if microorganisms can survive the extreme environment. NASA astronauts Tracy Dyson and Matt Dominic attempted the operation on the 13th of May, but had to abort it due to suit discomfort. Take a look at some of these visuals. We'll keep them running for you. Many thanks for watching. Keep it with News 9 Live.
And after that call took place, the crew went ahead and closed the EV hatch on the space station, and teams are currently working through next steps.